This fish is extinct in the wild. It doesn't exist in any river, in any lake, in any natural habitat on Earth. The only reason it exists at all is because people like you kept breeding it in their tanks. The aquarium hobby has one of the most underreported conservation track records of any human activity on the planet, and today I want to talk about that. My name is Harris Bard for Pond Life Aquatics. Welcome to the Science Series. This video exists partly because of our recent video on the Scottish positive list legislation, link in the description if you haven't seen it. But one of the most striking things that came out of that comment section was just how many people in this hobby are quietly doing conservation work, often without even knowing that's what it's called. This video is for them, and it's for anyone who's ever been told that keeping fish is trivial. Let's start with the number. At least 30 species of freshwater fish have been preserved or supported primarily through hobbyists' efforts, according to an analysis of the CARES priority list. Not zoos, not government programs, hobbyists, people with tanks in their living rooms and fish rooms in their basements. The organization that coordinates a lot of this work is called CARES. Conservation, Awareness, Recognition, Encouragement and Support. Founded in 2004, it encourages hobbyists worldwide to dedicate tank space to at-risk species, breed them and distribute offspring through a network of other qualified keepers. It's entirely volunteer run. There is no payroll. Valdez and Manjikar published a study in the journal Fishes in 2019 examining the CARES priority list. They found that hobbyists were maintaining over 80 species, not yet formally described by science, not yet assessed by the IUCN, not yet on any official endangered species register, known only to the hobby, documented only by the people keeping them. Think about what that means. There are species out there whose entire scientific record exists because a fish keeper noticed something, wrote it down, and shared it with others. Let me give you some specific examples because the abstract argument only goes so far. The white cloud mountain minnow, Tinichthyes albanubis, one of the most commonly kept temperate fish in the hobby, native to the White Cloud mountain area of Guangzhou, China. Virtually extinct in its original range. The captive population in aquariums worldwide is now its primary insurance policy against total extinction. The tequila splitfin, Zygoneticus tequila, a Goodeid live bearer from Mexico, declared extinct in the wild in the 1990s but kept alive for decades in hobbyist tanks in the UK and North America, maintained through a structured breeding network. Following a captive build-up through the early 2010s, captive-bred individuals from hobbyist stock were released into a restored river in Jasilco, with introduction efforts continuing through to around 2016. A species that had no wild population was put back into the wild by people with fish tanks. The Potosi pupfish, Cyprinodon alvarezi, maintained in captivity with reintroduction efforts underway, coordinated by the Spanish Killifish Association, a hobbyist organization working alongside conservation scientists. The Spanish toothed carp, Aphanius iberus, successfully reintroduced to restored lagoons in the Llobregat Delta through collaborative efforts, including hobbyist societies and conservation partners. These are not footnotes. These are success stories, and they are almost entirely absent from the public conversation about conservation. I want to spend some time on one family in particular because I think it illustrates everything about what the hobby can do when it takes conservation seriously. The Goodeids are a family of live bearers endemic to the Mexican plateau. Unlike the live bearers most people know about, your guppies, mollies, platies, Goodeids are true viviparous fish. Their embryos develop a direct nutritional connection to their mothers via structures called trophotaniae. ribbon-like outgrowths from the embryo vent that absorb nutrients directly from their mother's ovarian fluid. This is convergent evolution. Independently, Goodeids arrived at the same solution to the same problem that mammals solved with their placenta. The biology is genuinely remarkable, and almost every species in this family is in serious trouble. The Goodeid Working Group, the GWG, was founded in 2009 by a hobbyist who noticed that 2 Goodeid species in his own tanks were dying out. He reached out to other keepers, built a network, and the GWG now coordinates over 400 hobbyists maintaining at least one species of Goodeid. Members fund their own field trips to Mexico to assess wild habitat. The stud book they maintain tracks genetic diversity across captive populations to prevent inbreeding. One of the species we have in store right now is Scipia multipunctata, the sawfin Goodeid, endangered with most of its historic populations now extirpated, maintained almost entirely by hobbyist networks. It requires no heater in most UK homes. Room temperature suits it perfectly. It breeds readily in planted setups, and keeping it is, without any exaggeration, an act of conservation. There's another dimension to this that almost never gets discussed, and it came up powerfully in the comments on our Scotland video. When wild caught fish from a particular region have a genuine market value, the communities living near those habitats have a direct economic incentive to protect them. Remove that value, ban the trade, restrict the collection, and you remove the incentive. The fish becomes worthless to the people whose cooperation you need to protect its habitat. This isn't hypothetical. There is documented evidence from collection regions across Southeast Asia, South America, and West Africa that sustainable, well-managed ornamental fisheries create local economic dependency on healthy wild populations. The hobbyist demand funds the protection. A blanket ban on wild-caught fish applied without nuance can actively harm wild populations by destroying the economic argument for habitat conservation. This is the argument that the positive list campaigners never engage with, because it requires them to acknowledge that this hobby isn't simply extractive. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying the hobby has no problems. Wild collection of genuinely threatened species without proper management is a real issue. Unsustainable harvest practices exist. The release of non-native species into wild waterways is a serious ecological threat that our community needs to take more seriously, not less. But these are problems that proportionate, evidence-based regulation can address. Species-specific assessment, strengthened traceability in the supply chain, mandatory surrender programs rather than release. These are tractable problems with tractable solutions. What they are not is an argument for defaulting every species on planet Earth to banned until proven safe, which is what a positive list does in practice. A positive list wouldn't have saved the tequila splitfin. It would have banned the hobbyists who saved it. The next time someone tells you that fish keeping is just a hobby, that it doesn't matter, that it's frivolous, that the fish should be left in the wild, you have your answer. The white cloud mountain minnow is virtually extinct in its original range. The tequila splitfin went back into the wild from someone's fish room. The sawfin Goodeid we stock in this shop exists because a network of volunteers with tanks decided it shouldn't disappear. This hobby has a conservation track record that most government programs would envy. It's time it started being acknowledged as one. If you haven't already signed the petition against the Scottish positive lists, please do. The link is in the description. And if you want to get into conservation fish keeping like I would like to, look up the CARES programme and the Goodeids working group below. I'm Harris Bard for Pond Life Aquatics. This is the Science series. For now, that's all from me. And I hope you'll join me again next time for this Pond Life.